Okay. Ready, set, go.
Ready, set, go. Welcome to Shift Hit the Fan.
Welcome.
Ta-da.
Welcome, shifties. Ta-da! We've magically appeared again.
I just see my pose. I was like, what's going on here?
Looks like you're a mime.
Yeah, I gotta get better at miming if I'm gonna I was trying to half vogue, half jazz hands. Uh yeah. Morning.
Yeah.
We are
Good
here.
day. Buenos dias.
One of us is queer. All right. And we're gonna talk about God. Who
Gonna
even
talk about God.
who even does that anymore? We do.
Yeah, I think, well, that's an interesting thing. 'Cause I think we all have our own concept of God and what we've created, our own experiences of God.
Yeah. I'm looking around and I'm like, that's God, that's God, that's God. I was just like, I was just asking Elias right before when we had decided we were going to talk about God. I'm like, how do we even talk about God? It's like the ineffable. It's everything. It's you, it's me, it's there's nothing that's not. And how do you even describe it? Just like, the Tao
Yeah.
that can be named is not the eternal Tao.
Yeah.
I feel the
I think
same.
we all have our, I think we all have our concepts, like our images in our mind, but you think about the Bible and it's like man was created in the image of God, but a lot of times I think we create God in the image of our own likeness.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. That reminds me of a quote that I heard after that man was created in the image of God, and man has been trying to return the favor ever since.
yep,
We all have our own idea of what God is, just based on what resonates with us. Like, it has to be that because that's what feels, you know, that's where I feel I fit in.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a God point inside each of us. There's the concept of God inside of us, a sense of being God in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I
That's
think that's a
right.
beautiful, I think that's a beautiful aspect too.
Yeah.
We are creators in this world. We create all the time,
Hmm.
constantly bringing something new into effect, creating effects all around us, creating stories and images. And, in many ways, we are God because we are the creators of what of our existence, of our essence, our being, our what we see and what we feel and do. Those are all created inside of us, inside the body, and there's some conscious observer that gets to witness that creation, that aspect inside of us.
Yeah, everyone's right when they describe their God, because they're
Yeah.
they're describing just a, a small like peek into what God is, and they it's what they can wrap their minds around what what God actually is,
Yeah.
and they can get as vivid and as detailed and create. It's just it's like what I wanted to talk about last week, the imagination. It's like that's where that's where God is. That's what God is that's how it shows up for us, is the imagination, I think. It's funny that I just thought of that. I hadn't even thought about the imagination, but it's like how that's how we perceive our
Yeah.
gods. And even if you think you have the same view as somebody else in your like religion or whatever it is, your group of spiritual people, uh, you don't have the same view that your peers have, that your brothers and sisters in that community have.
Oh yeah.
it's still going to vary from person to person, based on how you're interpreting the words and the meanings and the messages, because it's going to resonate, and it's supposed to resonate differently for you. It's That's one of my hangups about, how people tell others to live, or try to coach people, or I mean, yes, they're being or that's how they've interpreted that it's their duty to do, but it's also um it's also confusing a lot of times for people, because they're getting this mixed message. And this is what I felt really strongly, when the pandemic had happened, and and people were sending out all of these different messages about, you shouldn't get vaccinated, you should, and you shouldn't do this and that, and to pull people out of what they have faith in already is what I think was causing all of the death. It wasn't the actual thing that they did. It's because they went against what they already had faith in.
Yeah.
And um so I'm always saying, well, which thing do you have more faith in? You gotta see which resonates. And there were people who were like, I don't know, I'm afraid of either one. And I'm like, meditate then. If you can find some time to meditate and see which one you're gonna have more faith in, uh that's the one you want to go with, uh because it's all the, like, the fears are what are gonna have you, more often than not, like, people, uh their cause of death doesn't align with whatever was actually happening. It was the fear. And I think that's why I couldn't be poisoned when I was a kid and had attempted to take my own life. uh I just didn't have emotions. I was indifferent, and I was maybe expecting uh something to happen, but because I didn't have the fear of it, and I didn't have the emotion or panic that went along with it, all I got was a teeny, upset stomach, and then the new belief that I guess I just can't be poisoned, right? I am impervious. I'm gonna be hard to take out. So, um,
Kind of goes back to the police placebo effect. You
mhm.
know, the way I think the first definition of the placebo effect was this guy who had this devastating cancer and was on his deathbed, and he heard about this medicine that was going to cure his cancer, but he was so far in the late stages of cancer that they wouldn't give it to him. And some doctor just, that he was fighting for it and fighting for it, and the doctor finally said, fine, we'll give it to you. And he gets the medicine and like just gets magically cured of his cancer. um, and um, and goes on and lives this wonderful life. Like his cancer is just gone, and all the symptoms are just gone almost immediately. And it's just this miracle that happens because he believed so much in this medicine. And then he goes and finds out that um, that medicine wasn't working for people, and suddenly his cancer's back. And he's, oh, it's it this, he had that belief that it wasn't what it was, and it just all the symptoms and everything immediately hit him. And so the doctor said, oh, well, that was that test trial, and but we have this new test trial that we're gonna that we'll try, and it's supposed to be really great and everything. And they give it to him, and it's just like saline. um and again, he goes out and lives his life, and then um I think shortly thereafter he finds out that wasn't working either, like that wasn't a thing either. um and like a week after he found out, he was dead with the cancer. um And it just kind of is this amazing thing of faith and belief, our creative aspects or our creative point inside of us, um, that has this marvelous ability to create the life that we need and be in alignment uh, with a good life. Um, and I think there's something really beautiful about that, that we have that ability, that we have that God point inside of us to create and create what we believe in. Um, and I think that's one of the hardest things to go through, is that we have that creative point inside of us, and it's all tied to um, our attention and our faith. Someone who someone was talking about faith, and I've talked about it on the podcast once or twice before, but that faith is simply where you put your attention. It's where you put your belief. Um, and we all have faith. None of us lack faith. It's just, where are we putting our faith? Where are we putting our attention? Where are we putting our energy? And so many people fight over that. They fight over that faith, that God point that's inside of us, to give them energy and attention, give them uh, even more power to create something in life. Um, and that's a scary thing. Like, just like you were saying, there's all these voices out there. And my recent camping and mushroom trip that I went on was again about that. Like, I have all these voices all around me. What do I believe in? What do I follow? What's real? What's true? And it just kind of came down to that, yeah, all these voices are going to help create something in my life. It's just a part of life. But what is it? What's my voice? What is it that I choose? And it doesn't matter what it is. It's just, that's my choice, right there. And that is my authentic voice. It can be creative, it can be new, it can be old, it can be a pattern, it could be whatever. It's just whatever I choose to experience in that moment.
Yeah. I was thinking, and they're all also like every one of those voices are the voice of God as well. It just depends on which one you want to choose. This is, I think, where the free will comes in, because they're all going to be the right one, depending on if you want to start your villain era or not, or like
Yeah.
it's it's all like, what was the scripture, when he created everything, he saw it was all good. And um it's like it's all just an aspect of it. You can't confine, you can't bottle, you can't um define, did I already say that, a god. So he plays all the parts, and you're the little character in those parts. And but it's like a choose your own adventure thing. So it's not it's not wrong to listen to these things. It just has a consequence, an impact, a certain experience, and whether you want to follow that, um, that's up to you. I mean, it's, and I know it doesn't seem like in the moment that it is up to you. There's some of them that really grip you and grab you, and feel like there's no way out of them. Um, but yeah, it's all the thing. I mean, people think that it's a lack of God when you don't see things going right, but there's no place that God isn't. That's also seen as good. It's our perception that sees it as either good or evil, uh,
Yeah.
because of how we experience it in our bodies. So, and there's so much that we create out of ignorance, because we have the freedom to create, because we were given that ability to express ourselves, through imagination. And we've created some pretty messed up things in the world. And that is God giving us the ability to do it ourselves. Now we just gotta, if we want it to be different, we've got to figure out that we are that God, that there's nobody else coming. Your mama ain't coming. You are the one. No one's coming.
Yeah.
Got to figure out how to get ourselves out of the muck that we've created for ourselves if we do want it to be different.
Yeah. And I think we got to be willing to look at our own perspectives and our own viewpoints of life, and what is it that what are we creating? You know, what's the definitions that we have in our life, the labels? Are we willing to look at other possibilities? And if we're willing to change those labels and those definitions, and we have such a huge ability to create something new. But I think that's a scary thing, because we like to feel like we have that foundation inside of us. We like to feel like we are, like there's something stable, like we know something. Uh, but what is it that we really know? What is it that what's really that stability? And what happens when that stability starts to crumble? What happens when that foundation that we think we have so firmly set crumbles beneath us? And are we willing to change and be flexible and flow with the change that is life, that is time itself? Because everything is constantly changing, constantly moving, and without that change, there wouldn't be time, there wouldn't be existence. Everything that exists functions off of change. The wavelengths themselves, the vibrant, it's a vibration, it's a fluctuation going back and forth of who we are and what we are. And I think that's a beautiful thing, to be with that change and allow it to express itself. It reminds me of Rick Rubin. I was listening to his book, the Creative Way, or the Creative something, the Creative Being, maybe.
Creative way.
And is that what it is? The Creative Way?
I think I have the book right behind me somewhere.
But he's talking about that these ideas, these creative points, don't come from within us necessarily, they come from without us. And are we willing and ready to be the antenna for those creative ideas to flow through us, to express themselves in whatever way they need to express? Which is an interesting thought, because that puts God outside of us, but at the same time, there's God within us. And so I think it just goes to show the connectivity of all things, of life, of the universe, literally the universe, the oneness of, you think about one and verse, like a spoken word type of thing. It's one action, one verb, one connected being. And I don't know, it's a really cool thought to have. Something to marvel at.
One multi-dimensional mind.
Yeah.
Multifaceted, multi-aspect. I'm thinking about the question, like, what happens when you're like, essentially your foundation gets rocked. And that's exactly what I'm going through. I had gotten to a point where I was just moving too far too fast in life. I was getting things too quickly for my maturity level, for what I had the wisdom available, or whatever my perception was. And I had to I had to have a few head injuries to knock the old information out, uh, to get me to, like, this place of starting from nothing. You know, I'm having to relearn language and fine motor skills and the names and faces of the people that I love, and um and having to remember who I am all over again. But this time with emotion. This time uh going through these challenges, life lessons, with a new sense of self, with insecurity for the first time in my life, and having to rebuild myself when I was 41, um or when I was I think I was in 2015. I don't remember how old. It's all a blur. Out for 2.5 years.
It all
And
happened.
it happened. uh and so now I feel like I know it, I know this stuff, I just don't know how to access it. And that is my way, and this is why it's taking me a long time to heal what I know I could have healed like that had I had my former mind. But was I gonna get um this deeply connected and grounded in my medicine had I just kept, pushing through and moving through things so quickly? I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't. I was still. I was that magical and not woo woo, right? To me, these conversations, I wouldn't have any part in them. Um, I thought these people were insane, and we are, but uh, but see, that's a part that was missing. I wanted to learn to love the way that God loves, because I felt like I didn't have that connection with people. I didn't have the the experience of being loved, because I was indifferent to everything and all this, and this has been my access to that, uh to not only self-love and my perception of myself, but the perception of magic and magical people and energy medicine, all that stuff. That was nowhere in my on my radar. And so yeah, I mean, sometimes when we get our world shook up, it's for that. I mean, that's what it was for me, at least.
Yeah.
Uh, I think of all the things that people probably think of in these situations, like when people are talking about these conversations, like, well, what about all the people that just die and never? And I have these questions myself, like, why am I going through all this stuff and all these other people are just dying? They die these horrible, with these horrible experiences, and you know they don't get to go through, they don't get the the chance that I've had to, not to think I'm about to die multiple times and then still keep swimming. And
Yeah.
they just are left with that horrible, impactful death and all this stuff. And it's something that I still haven't been able to reconcile for myself. Um in that, but it's in that again, ineffable. I can't pretend to understand why it happens. Uh for some and not for all. Uh, but I mean, it happens, and I've got to work with what I do know, and my access to myself, and maybe the more I pursue this, the greater understanding that I will have, or that I realize I don't need to have, and because it's all part of it all works together somehow. And yeah, the end. I don't know where else I'm going with that.
Well, the thing that I was thinking of is that this foundation seems to be this sense of self that we have. the sense of being, what we're trying to define as ourself, or what we call ourself, our identity. Um, and for you, that was really shaken and broken down. Um, your body, the universe just said, "Oh, you think you have a solid sense of self? Let me shake that for you. Let me shake the tree, show you how firm your foundation really is."
The baby. It
Yeah,
was definitely.
and I think that was my experience has been different, and a lot of the suffering that I've had is I've been shaking that sense of self. I've questioned, I've thought, and I've just looked at all these things that I've defined as myself, as my identity throughout the years, and just asked myself, is is that real? Is that what I want? Is that what you know, what is that? Um, and it's kind of crumbled a lot for me. It's a very weird feeling to have to redefine who I am and myself, um, and all the other things that are attached to that sense of self. And I look at all the things that I practice, all the healing modalities. In a lot of ways, those are methods to break down different levels of self within us. The spiritual self, the mental image of ourself, and also the physical layers of ourself, the physical layers through our muscles, our tissues, the cellular level, all these things that have this sense of purpose and sense of meaning, they get stuck and rigid a lot of the times. And I think that's where we say we want that ego death. So we want to break that rigidity and have more fluidity within that structure that's already built. And it's not like we need a complete death of ourself. We don't need a complete deconstruction of all these structures that we have in our body or in our life. I think it's, can we shake that system up a little bit? Can we bring less rigidity to it so that we can have more flow of the energy, more flow of the things that are vital to life, that keep us alive, that keep us in this beautiful state that we get to live in. Um, and I think that's where we have those scary moments. I feel like I've had a lot of moments where I feel kind of psychotic. I don't know what's real. I feel like I question all of these different narrations that I have in my head. And it's kind of led me to be in this really beautiful spot of, I'm just here now, and I don't have to worry about what's real or not real. I just get to exist. I just get to be, because all of these other things that I was chasing, all these different types of realities, all these definitions and labels, were causing the suffering. And I think we can find that a lot in our manifestations. I think manifestation is a process. It's kind of an alchemical process of, all right, cool, you want this thing, but to get that, you're going to have to shake yourself. You're going to have to shake up what you have identified with throughout your life. Um, and I think there's a lot of beautiful methods to do that. But if you want something different, especially radically different than what you currently have, you got to be prepared to face those shadows that you've hidden deep down and underneath the structure. And that's a scary process. There's a reason we put things in the shadows. Um, we don't want to see them. We don't want to know what those are. We don't want to face them. Um, but they're a reality inside of us.
Yeah, I know that that's my experience for sure. Is I also know that I'm asking for things that are a jump from where I am, and it does need to be a complete death of the old self for me to get there. So I did need to be this shaken off to get there, because there's no way I had the maturity or the mental clarity for what I've been asking for in my life. And I needed a lot more magic in my life. I even just had a dream about that. uh, it was in the form of, another content creator that I had just watched before it, that supposedly she needed more magic in her life, but everybody in your dream is an aspect of yourself. So I know that I'm also meeting this content creator who supposedly needed more magic in her life. Um, and That's funny. But I was thinking that we mean what you said, we don't, it doesn't need to be a complete death, but we're constantly dying to form ourselves.
Yeah.
We carry with us um, what we bind ourselves to, what we think are us, uh, and it's similar enough to the old life, but we are constantly dying. And even the your body, every 11 months you have a completely new body. That's how we age, and because we think we're supposed to age, we we create an older body in 11 months that we step into. And now the last year's model is completely dead, right? We think we can't access it anymore. Ridiculous. But that's why some people like seem like they never age, just because they don't have that concept of I'm supposed to age, I'm supposed to look older. They're not creating an older self, they're creating an identical self, or at least
Or a
as
newer self.
exactly. Some people start
You know,
looking.
I think a lot of times those people who are youthful are the ones that adapt to the change
Mhm.
easier. They keep that elasticity in their body and inside their mind, and they're not held down by all the aging process. You know, the faster we can move through those cycles of death and rebirth, and I think that the more we get to keep and um, and hold what we have.
I
And
know.
it makes me wonder, I don't know that we really can experience a complete death in this life. I was just watching some video of some lady who she said that she went through mushrooms for 3 months straight. Like every single day, she had a mushroom trip for 3 months straight. And she came out and she didn't even remember her own name because she had died and been reborn so many times. But there was still this element of the old inside of her, a memory of the old that still defined at least partially of who she was. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I don't think it's bad um to hold on to the old and have that memory, because I think the memory can also continue to shape and change who we are. And we can have different perspectives on the old and the memory that that exists there. And we find new memory, memory of past lives, of who we were before this life, or um, and we can pick up memory from other people as well. We can see what they've lived through, and I think it's the experience and being willing to continually experience something new and have a new perspective. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I really question that idea of can we really have a complete death? I think we can have a really close death, but I don't know if like a real ego death is a real thing. And I think almost like pursuing the ego death is in itself not a death. You're still holding on to a concept, a structure that exists um, within us.
It makes me think of a couple of things, like you were talking about past lives and how we can tune into other people's lives. And I thought of, the multiple people who said that they were Joan of Arc in the past life, right? People that either I knew directly or other things. Like it's because we have access to everybody's memory, right? We can fully like um identify with any other life if we know how to. And when we don't know that we're doing that, we think we were that person in a past life. The only regression that I've had, I was this big old lumberjack dude. That's all. That's all I remember. A tiny little girlfriend. Uh, and I was in a field that looks a lot like what you have behind you, and that's all. Um, that's as far as I let myself go. I'm like trying to find out my name and all this, and but yeah. But the other thing that I thought of was what had inspired you to talk about God today is what I was talking about. My experience and what's been coming to me is, as I'm learning to hold myself and learning to tune into different parts of my body and find out the story that I'm telling, and I've just been feeling like it just kind of feels like that's what God is. It it's God, and we're supposed to have these parts of us that won't ever die, that like you were saying, that because we need that individual like perspective, uh just like the cells in our body, right? Every single one of them plays a specific role in in building this body, a body that is miraculous, that can create, and it will also reflect to us what we think we're supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And so I've been feeling like this must be we must be God's experience of loving themselves, right? It's God tuning into one little cell and observing the world from that perspective, forgetting that he is or they are the entire universe, because they're just so like, you know gripped by this perspective and involved in what it is to be that one little cell with
Yeah.
all of the memories that, and we all have the capacity to be identical to all the other cells, and depending on the environment that we put that cell into, it will change to adapt to that environment. And the environment is the thoughts and what we think we perceive, right? uh, so it's all a journey of self-love, and if we perceive the other things that are going around in our body as destructive, then that's what we end up manifesting in there, which is how we get the cancers, and how we get disease and all this stuff, is because of our perception, and and it changes everything in the body. But if we learn to love that and repurpose and transmute and and integrate all these things, we can restore our body back to health. So that's been my more recent experience of what I think God is like. We may just be one of the cells, but we are the complete. We're just focused in on that one life, because we're supposed to learn to love ourselves at that level
Yeah.
intimately. We know every single cell, every hair, every, that intimately, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful perspective. And then for me, I've loved this concept of God through uh hermetics, and how just this idea that everything that exists is comes from the mind of the all, the universe, God, however you want to describe it, Atum in some ways. Just that everything that's here is just mind. It's just the imaginations of of God, and we are a part of that. Part of that exploration of God in His own mind and what they have created. Um, and I think that's a beautiful view of this life. And in the same way you're just saying, like, we are experiencing that mind in and of ourselves. um, we're experiencing that ability to just create. Go ahead.
I said, bless you, my child.
Right. um, we're getting to create or experience that creation through our mind. And I whenever I look out at a scene, I have gotten to this point where I just kind of see, I have this image that everything that's out there just doesn't really truly exist. Like, it's just a wavelength, and that wavelength, that energy enters my brain, and then my brain creates all this. It has to recreate what it feels like is everything that's around it. And that's an amazing thought and perspective to me. Just to think of how much creation, how much we have to like put together and interpret from just energy that's around us. And no wonder that babies don't have that ability to see and to feel, and to they haven't put together all the sight yet, because they're still trying to figure out what is that energy. They're putting it all together for themselves, and that's an amazing process to witness too. Just babies and their wonder of this thing that is energy that they're picking up on, and the memory that they pick up through, all the way down through the womb, and the epigenetic memory that they have to pick up from their mother, that gets ingrained into their system, into their DNA. We kind of have this central dogma in biology of DNA goes to RNA, goes into I can't remember the other ones, but eventually just turns into proteins. But part of me is like, well, that's just the blueprint. That's just like the supplies, the protein supply that we have. Like, here's a catalog. What do you want to choose from? And the epigenetics that's going through and choosing that DNA is the real intelligence that's inside of us. And that epigenetics has to be passed down through the mom. It has to come down, and some intelligence from the mom has to say, hey, this is what you're doing. This is the design that you have within you, that you've created for this life. And then we remember that, and we also pick up all their behaviors and characteristics of, you know all the traumas that have been passed down through the generations. But I think there's such a beauty to see that there's so much interpretation, just even at the cellular level, of who we are. And we can change that just by changing perspectives, changing what is it that we want to choose in life. What's the structure? What resources do we have, and what do we want to create with those resources? Can we be flexible and fluid within the structure that we've been defined in? What can we create new from being more fluid, and more having more fluidity in our life, being more creative, and that's the fun part of life for me now. Just getting to be here now and realizing that everything that I have is only here now. The past that I remember is only the thing that I'm creating right now. Like the past doesn't exist except for through the memory that's held and the way that I see that memory. Um, and same thing with the future. And the future has this infinite potentiality to it to create something new. And I think that infinite potential that lies inside of us also gives us that God point, that ability to just choose a path and do something completely different with life. It's like the butterfly effect, the wings of the butterfly, the wind that comes from the wings of the butterfly affects the changes of time. And and it's cool. It's such a fun dynamic that we have in this life.
I think that people talk about flexibility and the way that, they'll use a tree and the tree's flexibility in the wind to determine whether or not it breaks, right? And that reminds me of think, the thing that you say about being okay with all of it. That's the flexibility that you would have in to survive a storm, and as well as having the ability to create something new, because you when you're trying to create on top of all the junk that you're holding, you're going to create something out of ignorance, out of uh, retaliation, trying to fix something. You're not creating something pure and new. You're not creating a something out of love that's an actual solution, which has honestly been my biggest uh you know issue with the queer community and how we approach wanting to be accepted, when that's really what we want is we want to be just seen as human, as worthy of the same love and rights that everybody else is getting. But the way that we go after it is with force and with, trying to force ourselves into other people's things that we really don't want. We just want to be able to have the same tax uh, benefits and the same recognition of our love, right, for each other. We don't
Yeah,
we're
autonomy.
we're not really thinking about uh creating something for ourselves. We're just like, no, let's go into marriage, a thing that we're forcing ourselves into, and that's causing that even more. Even though it didn't start out as a religious thing, it used to be about property, it used to be about owning people. And
Yeah,
because the religious claimed it, and it's known as a thing that's supposed to be a religious thing, we it's actually offending their god, their or at least that they think it is, right? So
yeah,
it's conflict. But if we were to love and accept and be flexible and not be triggered by all that stuff, be okay, be that tree that can just go with whatever. We can create our own thing. We could create something new for the community, right? And this is the way we could approach any problem in the world, is if we could get out of our our triggers, our um strong emotions, we could get the clarity of a real solution that could work with the existing things uh, that we've already put in place, or you know uh, ha- I mean, I think that creates a condition where they're no longer that attached uh, to fighting back, because we're not responding by fighting back, like you often say. Also, the what is it in the realm of fighting fire with fire?
Fighting
Resist.
conflict with conflict leads to more conflict.
Exactly. Conflict is the word I couldn't think of. Yeah. Um, yeah, learning to be flexible, learning to like I said, it's learning to love. When I was healing my cancer, that's all I did is I went in and I and I recognized that it was the thing called cancer, and I saw what it looked like, and I just gave it a different role. I gave it something new to do rather than behave destructively and all that, because I knew I have the ability to create. But if I go in there telling it and commanding and yelling and fighting with it, it's not going to listen. It's not going to want to,
Yeah.
it's not want to play with me,
You're
right?
creating the rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. Creating the conflict, the um it spreading and being more destructive and all that, and creating that it does behave. And now, for me, it's cancer is not a thing. It's just a name we gave the cells that behave in a certain way. And doesn't have to be that. It doesn't have to have those roles. It can be an ally. Everything can be if we learn to communicate it with it and love it. And because I mean, it's the lack of love that has the world behave cancerous. Like the people behave cancerous, just like what's happening with Palestine and all that. It's the leaders that are behaving like what we think a cancer is, right? Destructive and destroying all the good cells and all that. Um, and I will never not send love to those leaders, and all the people that I think are destructive or that are being seen as destructive, because I know all the energy that's going towards them and all the hate and all that stuff. So I'm trying to counterbalance that with love and healing for them, so that they no longer persist in their behavior, their destructive behavior, their dehumanized behavior, and dehumanizing. So I'm not going to contribute to that collective um, behavior of that, because I know I'm God. I know I can have an influence. I know that I that I am one. In the moment I think I'm not, that's the devil. That's the Satan, right? That's duality.
Satan.
That's where I conflict with myself, um, in thinking that I'm less than than one uni.
We are the conflict, and we are the peace, and we are, so much. We so much that we so much want to get rid of the conflict, but we forget that if God created all things, He also created conflict, or they also created the conflict. It's there for a reason. It's a part of us. If we don't accept that part of us, if we don't accept the conflict that's in our lives, and we're always trying to fix the conflict, then you know, how are we going to be one with life, the universe? Well, I feel like that's a good stopping point.
Mm-hmm.
Be one. That is God.
Mm-hmm.
Oneness.
You are me and I am you. Let's just co-create something beautiful together.
Yeah. The creation and beauty of life itself.
Create the shifts we want to see in the world.
Be the shift.
A bunch of
Be
shifts.
flexible, be fluid, but also be structured, because that's part of it too. There's a structure behind all things, but as soon as that structure becomes too rigid, it breaks. So can you be fluid enough in your inside of your structure to prevent the break? Continually have the breaking inside of the structure.
Yeah. What
So go be shifty. Kaboom.
Love you, the end.